Football happy hour continuing here on HQ, and with Drew Brees putting an end to his Hall of Fame career, Jameis Winston now the de facto QB1 for the New Orleans Saints. But Winston agreeing to a one-year, $12 million deal with the Saints this offseason to stay on and try to revive his career. He'll have to fight off Taysom Hill, though, for the starting job, but given he's three years younger and his starting experience is much more vast, Winston seen as the most likely of the two to be under center when the 2021 season begins. And for more on the Saints, we now welcome back mock draft maven Ryan Wilson and NFL analyst Jon Berger. Gentlemen, let's start with the Saints and how they've done so far in free agency. Now, on top of Jameis, they've added 3 players to their backfield and a tight end. John, I'll start with you here. Some thoughts on what the Saints have done so far.
The Saints have done a good job so far, in my opinion. The good news in this situation, Jeremy, is there's not a whole lot of things they can do to screw this situation up in terms of free agency and draft, because you have so many needs across the board. When you looked at the front office, they sold out a couple of years ago to win the Super Bowl. That didn't happen. So when you talk about player needs and who do you need to re-sign in free agency, how do you handle the draft? They've done a pretty good job so far. You look at, safety Marcus Williams, and they put, the franchise tag. They re-signed Jameis Winston. The thing for me is the biggest question mark is it just doesn't feel like to me that Jameis Winston is the long-term answer. That's why he's on a one-year deal. So I'm not sure how you're going to solve that quarterback position. So I think they've done okay in free agency, but as I mentioned before, they're in a cap situation, which is probably the worst in the NFL. You've got a lot of different needs. You got a quarterback on your one-year deal. So the question becomes, what do you do now in the draft? And as I mentioned before, I don't think you can make a whole lot of mistakes because they're in a good position. They can get a good collection of skilled players as well as players on the defensive side of the ball. But I think long-term, you really got to be thinking about what are you going to do at the quarterback position. Simon Jameis Winston to a one-year deal, okay, I get it. It just doesn't feel like to me that he's the long-term answer at the quarterback position.
Yeah, John hit the nail on the head with the salary cap situation. The Saints basically had 27 cents in salary cap space to try to fix everything that they wanted to fix. And what we ended up seeing was a lot of guys leaving free agency. They had to cut some other players, Quan Alexander, Janoris Jenkins among them. And don't forget, a few weeks ago, Jeremy, there was some conversation when Russ Wilson wasn't happy with the way things were going to Seattle that maybe he ends up in New Orleans. With the salary cap, I don't know how that's happening because the way it is in New Orleans right now, they have very little wiggle room, and they were lucky to be able to franchise Marcus Williams. They signed a few guys. PJ Williams comes back in the secondary. They signed a few guys from other rosters, 2 or 3 players to help out. But at the end of the day, it starts, as John notes, with the quarterback situation. And is Jameis your guy? Is Taysom Hill your guy? Is the mix of the two somehow going to solve what you lost in Drew Brees last year and the years before that? That's the real question. Luckily, they have one of the best coaches in the NFL. They have a really good defense. They have a lot of good playmakers on offense. But at the end of the day, you're only as good as your 53-man roster, and we see this all the time in the NFL. If you're injured, if your starters get injured and you don't have backups, and that's really hard to do, we don't have salary cap space, you could go from a 12-win team to battling to win at least half your football games. So I think that's where the Saints currently find themselves. But if this quarterback situation works out, then it won't matter. So that's the big question as we head towards the draft here in a few weeks, Jeremy.
Yeah, when you look at that cap, I mean, I don't know how you don't panic when you look at the number in terms of that cap and what you're looking at in terms of that division and the kind of the things, the wiggle room that you're going to have to find, some creative accounting for certain. As you mentioned, Ryan, I mean, they've not ruled out making a move for a quarterback. We're still hearing whispers about Russell Wilson wanting out of Seattle. Maybe they move up in the draft. I mean, Ryan, if you're the guy that's in charge of making this decision, let's talk about the quarterback position. What would your plan be for the Saints looking at a quarterback?
Well, listen, Sean Payton is as good as they come in terms of evaluating talent and calling plays and dialing up the right play for your quarterback. It's a lot easier when it's Hall of Famer Drew Brees, but maybe he wants to see how this works with someone like Jameis Winston. And I'll say this about Jameis Winston. He showed up and seemed to recommit himself to football when he got to New Orleans. He seemed to be in better shape. This is sort of a joke, but not really. He got LASIK surgery last offseason, so maybe he couldn't see in Tampa Bay, and that had a lot to do with those 30-plus interception seasons. But, John talked about it. It's only a one-year deal. If you love Jameis Winston and you're really concerned about him going somewhere else, you would have signed him to a multi-year deal. That didn't happen. So what do you do now? Do you roll with Taysom Hill as sort of this hybrid player? I don't think so. I think Jameis is your guy for the moment. And the 49ers said the same thing about Jimmy Garoppolo. For now, he's our quarterback, but you're not going to be able to trade up, I don't think, high enough to get one of the top 5 quarterbacks. So you may have to rely on finding one in rounds 2, maybe round 3 if you're lucky. And otherwise, plan B right now, if you don't get a quarterback, is Jameis Winston. So I feel like that's the direction you're going. The good news is they have Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, a really good offensive line. Jameis can try to minimize those mistakes inside that Sean Payton offense, and they can go from there. If they get lucky, maybe they find a quarterback in round 2 that they like, that they can groom to come in and start next year.
Yeah, I would echo a couple of comments that Ryan made. Look, there's no scenario that at least I ran through in this draft that would make sense trying to get at the quarterback position. I think because they signed him to a 1-year deal, I think Sean Payton is clearly committed to trying to figure out how to make this work. It buys him some time for 1 season. And as everybody knows in the NFL, Sean Payton is one of the best coaches in the league at taking a quarterback and fitting him into the system and making him productive. So let's assume that Jameis Winston, let's assume he shows up. Let's assume that he minimizes his mistakes and really takes the coaching from Sean Payton. I think that buys you 1 year. I don't think there's any scenario that I've been able to come up with in this draft where you could get yourself in a position to go take a quarterback knowing what you just did with Jameis Winston. I think at that point, you're really looking at how do you surround him with some more playmakers, maybe at the wide receiver position, picking up an offensive tackle, picking up a couple of offensive linemen. But I think that's the situation you're going to see. They're committed to Winston, let him play a year, buy Sean Payton some time to go out into next year's free agent market. Can you get enough production out of Winston to win enough games? Probably. He's going to have to be coached up by Sean Payton. He's one of the best in the business. I just don't think there's any scenario by which you could get yourself in a position in this particular draft to make an impact.
Yeah, it almost seems like the Kobayashi Maru test for the Saints at the quarterback position, the no-win situation, or perhaps, as you say, to Peyton's genius, it becomes a 10 or 11-win situation. Okay, John, let's talk about draft needs then. What do you see as their biggest needs in the upcoming NFL draft?
Everything. I mean, look, this is one of the teams. I mean, look, it's everything. I mean, they're in a terrible cap situation. I don't think you can make a set of mistakes here. You're not going to deal with the quarterback position in this draft. I think at the running back position, finding a solid running back that could give you some reps there. But I think you could go out, you could make a wide receiver acquisition, offensive and defensive line and linebacker. I think that's what you're going to see them do. I think they're going to anchor to those bottom 3 rows, D-line, O-line, linebacker, possibly a wide receiver. They're not going to deal with the quarterback position because it wouldn't make sense. They can't get up in a spot that's going to make any sense for that team. So I think that's what you're going to see them do. O-line, D-line, linebacker, and I think you could probably pick up a premier wide receiver to give Jameis Winston another weapon in that offense, which they're going to need. And look, on Taysom Hill, I love the versatility, and I think Sean Payton can put an offensive package together using those 2 guys for 1 year, and I think Taysom Hill gives them a lot of flexibility. But I think this is what you're going to see them do in the draft. O-line, D-line, linebacker, wide receiver.
Yeah, John's list is actually pretty much my list, except somehow I'm glad he put it on there. I forgot running back. I think running back is sort of an underrated position that they could actually target. I've had in recent mock drafts, I've had them actually taking a running back like Najee Harris in round 1, even at the bottom of round 1. It sounds crazy. I don't think it happens, but it doesn't mean they don't have those needs. Quarterback is at the top of the list for me as well. Cornerback is also at the top of the list. They have Marshawn Lattimore, of course, but he's in the final year of his rookie deal, as are a couple of other players. Tight end is secretly a need as well. Jared Cook is gone. They drafted Adam Troutman. But again, if the idea is to surround your quarterback with playmakers, that's a good position to start. Running back is a good position to start. John also touched on wide receiver. You can never have enough good wide receivers, and they're not stacked with wide receivers in New Orleans. We talk about the Buccaneers doing just fine in that regard. The Saints are not in as great a shape. We forget because of Michael Thomas, but Tre'Quan Smith is on the last year of his rookie deal. They parted ways with Emmanuel Sanders, so they have needs there as well. But I think at the end of the day, it starts with quarterback. The question is, can you find one? Where can you find one? And does it make sense to take that person if it's not a round 1 guy, which seems impossible for them to get their hands on, given how low they're drafting in the first round?
And in some of those needs, I mean, they did sign Ty Montgomery from the Packers to, augment the running back situation, and they did bring in Nick Vannon on a 3-year deal as a tight end. So, I mean, addressing those needs kind of willy-nilly a little bit. Most of the mock drafters, John, I know you haven't looked at any of the mocks, but in terms of the mock drafters, the latest anyways, a lot of them have the Saints going defense. So what are the best options for the Saints for you, John, when you look at number 28?
I purposely don't look at the mocks, Jeremy, for that very reason. Because look, first of all, it's all wrong, and we all know that trying to nail that down this close into the draft. And keep in mind, you're going to see a heavy dose of deal making for the next couple of weeks, right? So I don't think you can go wrong here. I think there's a set of decisions you can make. I really think if you could go up and get Elijah Moore, the wide receiver, out of Ole Miss, that's one right there that I'm kind of targeting and keeping an eye on, because I think they could go get him. He's a playmaker. I think you can put him in multiple spots in that Sean Payton offense. He can get down the football field. He can create mismatches. And you talk to the coaches at Ole Miss. This has been a solid wide receiver. I think you can go get him. If for some reason he's not there, I think you go defense, and I think you look at Nick Bolton, the linebacker out of Missouri. I think he could be sitting in that spot, or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker out of Notre Dame. So in that first round, I think picking up one of those three players would make a lot of sense for the Saints, and I think it would make them a better football team on both sides of the football. But I kind of like that Elijah Moore pick, because I think he could be lingering down there in that spot. If not, you go defense.
John, I love the Elijah Moore pick, and you are one of the few people that are talking about him as possibly a first-rounder in the media. It's a good thing you don't look at these mock drafts, because the NFL teams like Elijah Moore a lot. I think they like him more than the draft media does, and that's okay. The draft media aren't making these picks, as you noted, but I think that's a sneaky, interesting pick. I'm going to go with your guy who you had going to the Buccaneers, Zaven Collins. The Saints need help on defense. Jeremy alluded to that as a possible first-round target. They need help at the linebacker position. He plays inside primarily at Tulsa, but you could kick him outside. He's such a fantastic athlete. Ran the 4.5s Friday at his pro day. There were 32 teams there. That should give you some indication of how much they like Zaven Collins. He could play alongside Demario Davis. There isn't very much depth at the inside linebacker position for New Orleans, so he feels like one of those layup picks you could have at the bottom of the first round if you're the Saints. Another guy I like a lot as a possibility there is Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher out of Miami. Also had a fantastic pro day earlier in the pro day process. Ran to the 4.4s for someone who's 6'5", 265, which doesn't seem human. That said, he is a fantastic player, so fantastic, in fact, he very well may not be there at the bottom of round one. There's some injury concerns, but if the NFL teams give that the all clear, he could very easily be a top 15 pick. If not, maybe he lingers a little bit and the Saints can grab him at the bottom of round one.
Yeah, that speed at that size is absolutely, it's almost irresistible. Okay, so when you look at rounds 2 through 7, you heard Amanda talk about it with the Buccaneers. I mean, a guy like Tom Brady. I mean, John, you talk about not being able to address the quarterback position in this draft. I mean, Tom Brady, 199, a gold mine for value there. So when you look at rounds 2 through 7, Ryan, what positions or players do you see being taped to the draft board for the Saints?
I'm going to go against John's suggestion. And in the second round, I'm going to be desperate. I'm taking a quarterback if I'm the Saints. So who do you take? Kyle Trask, to me, makes some sense. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He's not mobile. Sounds a lot like Drew Brees. He doesn't have Drew Brees' processing power, but he'll play indoors for most of the season, and he'll have a fantastic weapon in Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Gets the ball out quickly. You know who Kyle Trask had a ton of success with recently? Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney. So he has some familiarity with throwing to playmakers. I think that is a possibility there. We'll see if it happens. I haven't taken a lot of defensive guys on the rest of this board here. I like Benjamin St. Juste out of Minnesota a lot. A long corner who could end up going somewhere on day 2, second or third round.
I like that Kyle Trask pick. I hadn't really considered him slipping that far. If I go down into the second round and I work my way backwards from there, I think picking up, if Alex Leatherwood, the offensive tackle, slips in that spot, I think you automatically go pick up a great offensive lineman out of Bama. Then I think you can pivot to a Dwayne Eskridge, the wide receiver out of Western Michigan, gives you a little bit of playmaking capability on the edge as you work your way down the draft. Quincy Rhodes, defensive end. I think if you can pick 3 of those 4 players up on top of Leatherwood and on top of Elijah Moore, I think that would be a great collection of players. I think it would be a successful draft, and I think it automatically makes your football team better day 1 when they arrive to camp.
NFL analyst Jon Berger, NFL draft analyst Ryan Wilson joining us to talk about the Saints and the Bucs here on the Football Happy Hour. Here are the odds for the Saints, by the way, to win post-Drew Brees pre-NFL draft. Their odds dropped significantly to win the Super Bowl when Brees said, "I'm hanging them up now," plus 2,200, plus 1,100, half that to win the NFC. NFC South at plus 220. Good bet to make the playoffs at minus 120, but plus 100 to miss the postseason.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.